We'll move on now to our next presenter. Jose Cordeiro is an engineer, an economist, a futurist, and a transhumanist. He's worked in multiple domains, including economic development and international affairs. His book, The Death of Death, addresses the emergence of strong artificial intelligence, or conscious machines, with the awakening of matter, which we would assume is partly the brain, and the technological singularity. So welcome, Jose. How are you?
Very good. I'm happy to connect with you from Madrid, where we are in the middle of this war against COVID. And this is one of my arms, one of my weapons against COVID. So I like to wear it as a sign of war. And yes. I want to begin then talking about the death of death, which is my idea of biological and computational immortality. If we look at all the pandemics in history, COVID-19 actually is a small pandemic. The Black Death killed about 200 million people, about a third of the population of Europe, and some other viruses have also killed many people, even the Spanish flu, which was not a Spanish, by the way. So COVID really is a small pandemic in the history of the planet. However, the US government put over $2 trillion, and big companies are putting billions and billions of dollars. Altogether, it is estimated that maybe between 11 and 14 trillion dollars are spent to fight COVID. So imagine if COVID is a small pandemic, what we should do for bigger viruses and bigger diseases. Also, they are all related to aging. The older you are, the higher probability you have to die. So the number one risk factor, and not just for COVID-19, but for anything, influenza, Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease, anything, the number one risk factor is aging. So aging really is the enemy. And we need to begin thinking that diseases are related, and they are related to aging. As of now, we treat them separately as different silos, one here, one there, but they are really, really all related. So we have to put aging at the center of the problem and move from sick care to a global integrated health care. Also, we cannot just cure one disease, because if we cure all cancers, we might add 3 years of extra life, only 3. If we cure all heart problems, maybe 4 years. If we cure cancer and heart disease, 7 years. But if we actually cure aging, if we stop aging, we will add decades and decades of healthy life. And that is why my fantastic British co-author, David Good, who studied in Cambridge, and I also studied in Cambridge, but Cambridge, Massachusetts, at the MIT, we decided 3 years ago to write a book to put some of these ideas based on his work and on my work in Spain and in Latin America. Our book came out first in Spanish. It was #1 bestselling in health and chemistry, biology. And then we published in Portuguese, also #1 bestselling book. And we are donating all the royalties, all the dividends, all the book rights to research, both the Spanish edition and the Portuguese edition, to the Sense Research Foundation in Mountain View, California, Aubrey de Grey's Foundation, and in Spain and in Brazil. We are coming out soon with 3 other editions, Chinese, Russian, and French. And we are still waiting for a good English publisher. So if anyone here has connections to a top English publisher, please write to me, because we are interested to go to one of the top publishers in the UK or in the USA. About 15 years ago, I went to visit Sir Arthur C. Clarke in his home in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, Sri Lanka. And all of you know him, very famous for his science fiction, but also science, because he was an engineer, actually. And he wrote the first 3 laws of the future over half a century ago. And he said, when a famous scientist says that something is probably possible, he's probably right. But when he says it is impossible, he's probably wrong. Second law of the future. The only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture past those limits into the impossible. And third law, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So here we are going to talk about magic, because what we are going to see in the next 20 years is not equivalent to the last 20 years. It is more equivalent to the last 2,000 years. The next 2 decades equivalent to the last 2 millennia, because everything is accelerating. In fact, my friend Ray Kurzweil has been talking about the singularity and immortality by the year 2045, or before, actually before 2045. This idea has been developed in his book, The Singularity is Near, and he is just finishing the continuation of that book, which is very appropriately called The Singularity is Nearer. The Singularity is Nearer, that should be coming out next year. And I invited him to come to Madrid, to Spain, to talk about this. And I invite you all also to come and join us in Spain to talk about the Singularity is Nearer. With Ray Kurzweil, I was one of the founding faculty of Singularity University in California, where we talk about all of these issues, the singularity, artificial intelligence, neurotechnology, biotechnology. Basically, there are 4 major technologies of the future, as described by the National Science Foundation of the USA. Nanotechnology studies atoms, biotechnology studies cells, infotechnology, bits and bytes, and cognotechnology, the neurons. The 2 technologies on top, nano and bio, are the hardware of life, the hardware. And the 2 on the bottom, cogno and info, are the software of life. And we will actually reach not 1, but 2 immortalities. We will have an immortality of the hardware and an immortality of the software. And there are 2 major dates, according to Ray Kurzweil, and some other people too that I truly believe, 2029 and 2045. What will happen in those 2 dates? 2029, on the hardware side, we will basically reach longevity escape velocity. That means that for every year we survive, we live after 2030, we make 1 extra year of life. So that will allow us to keep on living indefinitely, but still aging. Until in the year 2045, we will reach biological immortality by rejuvenation technologies. That means we will actually reverse aging at the latest by 2045. That is on the hardware side, the more biological side. Below, on the software side, the more computational side, there are the same 2 dates, 2029, we will pass the Alan Turing test. That is that you will not know anymore if you're talking to a human or if you are talking to an artificial intelligence. And then by 2045, we will reach the technological singularity, which is a cloud-based artificial intelligence that we will combine all of the intelligence of humanity together. So hardware and software immortality, 2029 and 2045. Why this? Because technologies are changing exponentially, faster, smaller, cheaper, and better. You probably remember the punch cards of IBM 40 years ago. I used them, but then they were 1K of memory, about 1K, different sizes, but 1K. And then floppy disk, the first one's 8 inches, and then they became smaller and smaller, but more and more powerful. Basically, in the last 3 to 4 decades, we have moved from 1K to 1 tera. That means billions of times in a few decades. And this keeps on continuing happening. In terms of the brain, the software of what we are, normally we talked about 3 parts of the brain: the reptilian brain, the limbic brain, and the neocortex of the intelligence. But now we are talking about an exocortex, a cortex outside the brain that will give us super intelligence, super memory, and super communication capabilities. This exocortex we will connect to our neocortex for this super capability, super intelligence. How complex is the brain? There are many ways to measure it, but a simple one is to count the number of neurons, about 10 to the 11, and then the number of computations per neuron, 1,000, maybe more per neuron. That makes 10 to the 14 synapses, connections, and then computations also about 1,000 per synapses, you could say. These are average numbers. Anyway, that gives about 10 to the 17 operations per second. Maybe a bit more, 1 order of magnitude more, even 2 more, but it is a matter of time until we reach those levels. And companies like Neuralink are working on that, connecting our brain to the internet and giving us access to artificial intelligence as well. That is on the biological brain, but also the biological body is moving also exponentially. We have sequenced the human genome very fast and cheaper. The first time it was almost $3 billion and it took 13 years. Today, you can do it in about $100 in 1 hour, and this is becoming faster and cheaper. Biologically, we are also able to create new life forms. In 2000, the first artificial virus was created. In 2010, the first artificial bacteria was created. And soon, in 2 to 3 decades, we will reach the complexity of the human body biologically. So this is absolutely incredible what is happening. And many people like myself, we consider aging a disease, but a curable disease. And we expect to cure aging in 2 to 3 decades. Why? Because of what we have done in the last 2 decades. Imagine, we have been able to multiply by 2 the life expectancy of mice. We have mice that live close to 200 human years, 400 human years for mosquitoes, and 1,000 human years for worms, for C. elegans. These are the Methuselah worms. Methuselah worms, they live 1,000 human years equivalent. And this was done in the last few decades. Imagine what we are going to do in the next few decades. On top of that, we already know that immortality exists. There is biological immortality, like cancer cells. And since 1951, we discovered that cancer is biologically immortal. Additionally, good cells, germ cells, are also biologically immortal. So we have bad immortal cells, good immortal cells, small organisms like hydras that are also biologically immortal. And the first life forms of the planet, bacteria that divide symmetrically, are also considered biologically immortal. So life appeared to live. The reason of life is life and more life and better life, immortal life. My dear friend Aubrey de Grey, who wrote the prologue of my book, Ending Aging, his book, The Death of Death, the book with David Good and myself, he talks about this. And at the time he was considered a charlatan when he published that. MIT, my alma mater, called him a charlatan. They said he was nuts in 2005. And in 2019, 14 years later, they actually said, actually, maybe Aubrey is right and old age is over. Look at this change of mentality from the best engineering school in the USA in 14 years, from being a charlatan to being right. So all truth goes through 3 stages. It is ridiculed, then it is opposed, and then it is accepted as self-evident. And this is, I believe, what will happen with aging research, computational and biologically. Like my friend Ray Kurzweil talks about the 3 bridges to immortality. The first bridge in the 2010s that takes us to the second bridge in the 2020s with biotech, and the third bridge in the 2030s with nanotech that takes us into the 2040s with artificial intelligence and immortality. Many companies are investing in immortality, big companies like Google, Microsoft that is going to cure cancer, Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg and his wife that will donate 99% of their fortune to cure aging. And there is a growing ecosystem, billions, soon trillions of dollars. This will be the largest industry in the planet in the next 10 years. The largest industry, rejuvenation technology. And even the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2012, Shinya Yamanaka, he got the prize for rejuvenating a cell. This is now very well known today, and it is advancing very fast. So I foresee that in the year 2045, I will be younger, but not because of a Russian app called Face App, but because I will be biologically younger, and also my brain will be connected to internet. So I want to close by inviting you to come to Spain, to Madrid, to the next Futurist Summit Transvision that was 2020 originally, now 2021. We had robot Sophia, last time. Now we are going to have Ray Kurzweil talking about the singularity is nearer. So let's take this crisis as an opportunity, like the Chinese say. That is the term for crisis in Chinese. It is danger, but it is also opportunity. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Jose. I mean, I think that you've taken us through some huge subjects there. And I guess that one I'd like to maybe just revisit and come back to in terms of the escape velocity equation and where we are now with the advancement of AI. And obviously over the last few days, we've been talking about a lot of very interesting neural technologies, BCI obviously being a big part of that. Do you consider that people might actually just skip the whole rejuvenation phase and just go straight to cloud? Is that going to be a possibility, do you think, within the next 40 years?
Actually, that's an excellent question. And you know, Ray Kurzweil has that point of view. Aubrey de Grey is more biological immortality. Ray Kurzweil is more computational immortality, uploading into the cloud. I am in both fields, and I am working towards both. What is interesting is that they both might happen in the same time frame, in the next 20 years to 30 years. So we live in truly exciting times.
Maybe it's a choice of which retirement plan you can afford to pursue, right?
But it will be basically free. I think these technologies will eventually be free, available to everybody who wants them.
Well, Jose, thank you so much for your presentation, and we've got lots of interesting questions coming through, so we'll catch up with you a little later. So thanks very much for your presentation. Awesome.